Hey guys, so today I kind of wanted to go on I guess kind of a bit of a rant on Shen right now, in the current meta anyways. And this is not to say like Shen's necessarily weak or anything. I just think there are some glaring issues with the champion that kind of make it almost impossible to play in certain matchups, especially at like higher elo versus like challenger players. And I think the biggest issue for Shen right now is that there is a lot of just like too much easy to hit damage in top lane. What I mean by that is, like champs like Aurora with like Electrocute, or like Jace right now after getting buffs, it kind of makes it unplayable for Shen. Like, for example, I played against a bunch of Auroras recently, and especially with the changes to the buffs to Electrocute a couple patches ago, the champ is almost borderline unplayable. Like, I would almost dodge the matchup. That's how bad it is. The thing with Aurora especially, this kind of applies to Jace too, is that their abilities are fairly easy to hit. What I mean by that is Aurora level 1, like level 2, is Q, auto, reactivate Q, and that damage plus electrocute almost can like do a third, if not like half your health, right? That in combination with the fact that Aurora is also a very slippery range champion. Same with Jace too. Jace has a lot of mobility, plus he has a knockback, plus he has a slow, etc. It makes it so the game for Shen is very hard to play. A proposed change, I'm not exactly sure how you would necessarily fix this. You could give Shen like a slight base MR buff, but that might make him, more viable mid. I know Xpetu does it, plays Shen mid. I think that would be an okay change, but again, I don't know. Like, that might actually make maybe Shen 2 OP in mid lane. I'm not really sure. Another proposed change I've like kind of thought about is this kind of leads to my second issue with Shen. A lot of the time, your W is not an ability in lane. What I mean by that is if you're facing any AP mage top lane, so like I said, Aurora again, Vlad, I'm trying to think of like some other mages right now. Like, you can even face maybe like Cassiopeia or Rise top. In those specific matchups, your W is not an ability. You can block a couple auto attacks, but at that point, you're using your W to block maybe like 40 damage, right? And it's a 20-second cooldown. It's a very long cooldown. The issue with that is you are basically playing lane with 2 abilities as opposed to most enemy champions that are playing with 3. Like, for example, Aurora, your W basically does nothing. If you use it, you block 1 auto and then you don't have an ability for 20 seconds. And even if you block an auto attack, it blocks 40 damage. Something I thought about before to change, maybe I'm sounding a bit too greedy here, is I think Shen W needs a bit of a mini rework to kind of be like Jax E, for example, right? If you take a look at like Jax E, not only does it stun and not only does it do damage, but it also reduces damage taken. Not just blocking auto attacks, it does also block, I believe, 25% damage from AoE abilities. I think Shen needs something similar like that in his kit. Now, to be fair, I know Jax E doesn't apply to teammates, but a lot of the time, especially for laning phase, Shen W is not, you're not using it for teammates. You're using it kind of like a really shitty Jax E, right? Something maybe that could possibly work is, maybe he reduces like a flat amount of damage while in his W. I don't know how you would balance that, but like maybe like, because it's about like I believe it's like 1.75 second cooldown, duration for Shen W, and it's about like an 18-second cooldown. You can maybe do something like reduce damage taken by like 10% while in the circle. Maybe just for Shen, if you really want to bounce it just for Shen. It doesn't necessarily have to affect his allies. But again, that's just like, and I'm just kind of like brainstorming ideas here. But yeah, this kind of has been, I think, an issue for Shen for like a long time. Like I said, I don't necessarily think he's weak. He has very good matchups. But I think a glaring issue with the champion right now is he has matchups that are completely unplayable. I'm trying to think of like other champions. People say like I think Riven, Rekton does hard counter Riven, for example. But the thing with like certain champs into Shen is that there is no like Riven can kind of bail herself out by like proxying or at least having some sort of wave clear, right? So for example, like Jace this game, I'm almost at the mercy of how he wants to play, how he dictates the lane, because I have no wave clear, right? And that's a huge issue for Shen. That's always been an issue for Shen. It's just not having any wave clear. I know other champs like Fiora also don't have wave clear. I like not every single top lane champion has wave clear. I get that, but it's more so having no wave clear in combination with Shen's kit makes it worse than Fiora, for example, right? Fiora can at least duel, she can space. There's like at least some sort of skill expression compared to Shen anyways, because Shen's kit is very straightforward, right? If you're against Jace and he dodges your taunt, you are not a champion. You cannot CS, you cannot wave clear, you cannot buy space if your E is down, right? If you look at a champion like Fiora, for example, or like even Camille, who has very limited wave clear, they have like an auto attack reset. Camille has some wave clear to some extent. Fiora has some, she at least has a way to get onto the opponent with like W, queuing onto them, etc. The thing with Shen is that your E is very telegraphed. So against a ranged champion in lane, it is basically, especially in Challenger anyways, it is quite difficult to hit it without losing majority of your health bar. Another thing, I guess, point number 3 I kind of want to mention is a single rune has been the hardest counter to Shen for a while now. So for example, Teemo's, Aurora's, Vlad's, Jace's, any of these ranged champions that go resolve secondary with like second wind demolish bone plating, make it so Shen's small window of opportunity to trade basically non-existent. So as you can see here, Jace has resolve tree and he does have grasp. So I know grasp got nerfed for range, thank goodness for that, but the problem with the green tree into Shen is that it is already very difficult for Shen to get on top of ranged champions because a lot of them already have some sort of mobility, and because they are already playing out of range, and because they also have some sort of like disengage tool. Like Jace has E, for example, Aurora has like her invisibility, Vlad has his pool, Teemo has like blind, on top of being ranged and on top of being fairly mobile with movement speed built into their kit. It makes it very hard for Shen to duel, and it doesn't matter I feel like it doesn't matter how good you necessarily are on Shen. If they just have bone plating, the second you taunt in, you cannot do any damage, and then you committed all your abilities to said trade, and then you have to like disengage because you can't continue that trade without any cooldowns, right? And if you back out, you end up losing the trade because they had bone plating and blocked a bunch of damage. And then rinse repeat, and there's almost nothing you can do in these lanes. You're almost bound to fall far behind in CS, take bad backs because you're forced to, otherwise you risk dying. And it's just like a very uninteractive, like really shitty situation for Shen. Again, like I can't recommend certain changes because you might break the game in other aspects. For example, like you could nerf bone plating for ranged champions, but then it'd be kind of shit to take like mid lane versus certain champs, for example, right? So I'm not sure how you would exactly, nerf bone plating for top lane, but I feel like that you taking that rune plus demolish like completely shuts down Shen. Now to clarify, like I said, I'm not saying Shen is weak by any means. I think he does have very good matchups. For example, I think, Jax, Aatrox, Camille, these are all like, or maybe not Camille, but like these are all very like skill-oriented matchups where, if you're a better Shen than they are a Jax, you'll win the matchup. You'll be rewarded, right? And vice versa. If the Jax is better and you lose a Shen, it feels fair. It feels like you are actually in control of the game. My issue with Shen is that a lot of these matchups, regardless of whether or not, like, they could just blind pick Aurora, and then, like, because I'm a one-trick, I know that is an issue of being a one-trick. You're kind of just stuck in the shitty matchup. But it feels like there's almost, like, no counterplay despite how well you play and despite how poorly the enemy plays, because it is just basically a champ gap at that point. Like I said, I know other champs also have very bad matchups, but other champions have room to outplay. Like, I think I've seen Riven's definitely beat Renekton's before. I've seen, I've seen some Camille's beat Jackson before, although I know that is a notoriously hard matchup for Camille. I don't think there's a single champion that struggles more, at least in top lane, versus range matchups, because even a champ like Darius, for example, can take Ghost, and he has like an ability to run you down. Shen does not have an ability to really stick on you, especially early game with like such long cooldowns, right? I think I've mentioned it before when I stream. They could maybe like buff Shen cooldown by like 2 seconds, or give him like higher base health regen. It's not even just the fact that I can't, like, you can barely even win lane with these champions versus certain champs like Aurora, unless they're like abysmally bad. It's more so you can't even do anything, period. You can't, like, you know, safely farm because, like I mentioned earlier, Shen has no wave clear, and he has a very, like, basic kit compared to other champions. So there's, like, you know, you can't really do much with this champion when you're in a bad matchup, basically. And I think that's the issue at the end of the day. It just feels like Shen is almost unplayable into these champions, right? And it doesn't matter how, like I said, how good you are on Shen, I feel like anyways, or how bad the enemy is, unless they're like abysmally bad, which, you know, you don't really expect the enemy to be that bad in like Elo's like Grandmaster Challenger. Like, you expect them to be at least decent. And at that point, it doesn't even matter how good you are in Shen, you just like auto lose, you know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to get that out there. Again, like, I've kind of made some proposed changes before. Like I said earlier, Shen W granting like maybe like flat damage reduction, maybe just for him. If I think it's for his teammates, I think that might be a bit too broken. But like I said, it just feels like he doesn't have an ability sometimes. Besides that, I think a lot of, outside of like maybe Jace or like Vayne top, God forbid, they can maybe buff Shen's base MR by a couple points. I think that might help. It might help him survive, you know, another Vlad Q, another Aurora Q, etc. And, you know, maybe that is a very, I feel like that might be a very small change, but it might be a very decent change. I don't know if that would break Shen mid, but that's just my opinion. Or, you know, maybe just give him like higher base health regen or something. I think Shen just needs some form of survivability, or like some sort of outplay, or like he needs something in his kit to make these matches more playable. Because I can't tell you how many times I played in like, you know, I played like thousands of games of Shen at this point, and you know, I've peaked Challenger basically every season, so I know how to play most of these matchups. And you know, for Aurora, for example, I've lost to like master Auroras before. It feels like it's an auto lose lane, unless A, your jungler ganks you, which is already kind of hard. Like, Aurora's already fairly slippery, or you just get 4 winning lanes, or sorry, 3 winning lanes, 2 winning lanes and jungle. And at that point, it's like, you know, you're kind of just like stuck suffering and just getting carried, right? Regardless of how well you play it. And you know, that kind of just does suck. But yeah, that's kind of it. That's kind of just my rant for today. I have talked a lot about it before, and I'm not sure what other Shen mains think of this. I don't know. I haven't really discussed with like Petu or like Shending. I haven't really talked about many other Shen mains right now, but I think, you know, ever since they buffed certain keystones or like they buffed certain champions, Shen has been kind of unplayable in some matchups. You know, if you look at like certain stat sites too, like u.gg, lolalytics, whatever, Shen actually is quite strong. You know, I'm not saying he's weak by any means. It's just he has certain matchups that make him feel unplayable. And yeah, you know, I proposed my ideas. I don't know if Riot will listen, but I guess this is just kind of like a rant. So just want to get my thoughts out there. But yeah. Let me know if you guys agree in the comments, or, you know, maybe you guys disagree and you think I'm complaining and you guys think Shen is broken. Funny enough, I have seen people complain that like Shen is like super OP in, like, when I stream anyways. People say like Shen's OP, meanwhile I'm facing Riven, but that's just me. Anyways, yeah, I hope you guys like this rant, or not, but yeah, just let me know in the comments what you guys think. And yeah, that's kind of it. I'll see you guys in the next video.